Hisham, to get us started, I thought maybe you could just give us an overview of lean technologies, your business in the region, and the problem that your business has identified to solve. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. Thank you for having me. And that's a great question. We at Lean aim to solve the critical problem of data infrastructure for financial technology in the Middle East. You can basically think of us as the pipes for fintech, and we obviously know that fintech is meant to grow significantly over the coming years. I think what you just pointed out about the growth of venture capital funding is one clear indicator of that trend.
And Hisham, Lean really is the bridge between emerging and existing financial service providers. And it's a particularly interesting space because it's quite similar to Plaid. This is the business that was acquired by Visa back in January for $5.3 billion. What is your addressable market and where can you operate that Plaid doesn't? Where do you see that gap being filled by your business?
Well, that's a great question. Plaid's acquisition was obviously a great testament to the importance of players in this space, particularly in the B2B data aggregation space. We noticed that there was a serious gap in the market, particularly in the emerging markets around the Middle East, North Africa, and the GCC in particular. And that's why we sought to fill that void by building our solution. We've actually seen tremendous support and growth in acceptance for the solution that we're building and similar players in this space, and we're actually quite excited to continue to grow.
Hisham, Rosanna joining the conversation. Over the past few years or so, we've seen an increased number of bank mergers, especially within the GCC region and especially within the UAE. Does this present an opportunity or a challenge to a business like yours?
Well, it's yet to be determined whether bank mergers are going to be an opportunity or a challenge. I would rather think about it in terms of incumbent banks and challenger banks and what's known as new banks. What banks like Revolut, Monzo, and N26 have shown around the world is that the challenger banks are coming in fast. They're coming in heavy with new technologies and solutions, digital first, mobile first offerings in some cases that can seriously differentiate themselves from existing traditional banks. We've seen this reaction of mergers and banks doubling down on their digital strategy in an effort to obviously counter that new trend. It's yet to be determined how regional banks respond to this new trend, but I'm hopeful that they're moving in the right direction.
Well, and staying within the region, how amenable do you find local governments to discussing transformations and changes that are needed in regulation to allow fintech businesses like yours to operate there?
Well, that's a great question. They've actually done a tremendous job over the last 2 or 3 years, particularly in the Gulf countries, in enabling fintech companies to enter. If we look at SAMA in Saudi Arabia, the central bank, or the CBB in Bahrain, or similar entities in Kuwait, the UAE, and others, they've all established what's known as the Fintech Sandbox Initiative, which basically is aimed at enabling emerging fintech solutions to enter the market that were previously unregulated. And this is obviously much needed in a region like ours, where the population is so young and where the population is so demanding of new fintech services to satisfy their needs. And so we believe governments have actually been moving tremendously fast in the right direction.
Exactly, Hisham. And when there's so many problems to solve in the Middle East, it's a great opportunity for businesses like yours to thrive and for the startup ecosystem to continue to grow. I wanted to ask you about trust, though. And do you think it's getting harder for your end user to place trust in a product like yours in this environment, particularly when you look at scandals like Wirecard, for example, which has really thrown a light on financial services? It tells us that there are bad actors out there and that auditors as well have a lot to answer for.
Absolutely. I think trust is first and foremost one of our most important responsibilities as a company operating in this space. And I think the customer's trust is not something we should take lightly. I think this is first the responsibility of regulators to ensure that there are standard, well-defined, well-orchestrated regulations that can be followed and complied with by most players in the space. But I also think that stringent measures need to be put in place by the private sector to ensure that the standards that the private sector adheres to are high enough. We at Lean, for instance, prioritize cybersecurity, customer protection, and data privacy as one of our core pillars. And we go to great lengths to ensure that customers have all of those measures in place.